Welcome back to Open Your Eyes. We're about to jump on into our first segment for the morning. As a matter of fact, this one definitely dear to us. We'll be getting some updates on emergency preparedness policies and planning for BECOL and of course for NEMO. Now in to tell us about it, we've got Alhenry Westby, who is the regional coordinator for NEMO. We also have Oscar Alonzo, who is the Environment Health Safety Supervisor at BECOL. He's right there in the middle. And on the end is Martin Alegria, Chief Environmental Officer in the Department of the Environment. Guys, good morning. It's so nice to see you and welcome.
Good morning. Morning.
When we hear about updates, when we hear policies, you know, it actually brings us to alert because it's very important we get updates, and that's something that we should do as much as possible. Policies must be put in place. So we want to start off with the updates and policies and preparedness from both, either from the Department of the Environment and NEMO. Good morning.
Morning.
Maybe I should.
Yeah, you jump in. You jump in. You look ready.
No, it's just we are here just to, like you said, update us, the country, especially people in the western region of Belize, about the early warning system. That's a major objective of today's appearance.
So what is the early warning system? When we hear that, what do we think about?
It's a plan that we have in terms of what to expect if there's any emergencies in any of the three dams, three hydros, and how to react. So we are already prepared from the entire community downstream, the major settlement of San Ignacio, Santa Elena, and even farther down. What to do if there's such a system activated, no? The system consists of a whole slew of sirens, areas to go to where it's routes to follow, and what to do in the eventuality of such occurrence. No? So we are here to update a little on what that is, what we have been doing, and more importantly, what we plan to do for the future. No? And the technicalities behind it, these two gentlemen here have it down to a pad.
Now, let's step back a bit and talk about what the vulnerable communities are. So you're talking about dams which hold water, and there are many different emergencies that may come about from challenges at the dam. What are the primary fears or the primary risks that you're mitigating? Flood, clearly.
And especially what we concentrate on is people living along the Mopan and Makal River, especially the Mopan. As Alegria rightly said, we have the EWS system set up in the vulnerable communities that the study showed would be affected, which would be, we start at Black Rock. We have another system set up at Char Creek. And you know those are tourist areas. We have at Cala Creek, Cristo Rey, Bullet Tree, Santa Familia, and San Ignacio, Santa Elena.
Okay.
How many people in those communities? Combined?
Combined, it's a couple thousand.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
When we hear AWS, what are we talking about here?
Early warning system.
Okay. So we've got the early warning system. Have these systems been tested so we know exactly that, you know what, if anything should happen, because emergencies can happen at any time and folks need to keep abreast of this. Have these systems been tested?
I have my buddy right here to answer that question.
Oscar.
Yes, we work very closely with NEMO, and of course the main agency that regulates the BECOL, the DOE. So every year we have in our environmental compliance plan that we must test these systems annually. Right? So every year we carry out a simulation, and that simulation can range from anything to from a full-scale simulation involving mobilization of emergency agencies, the mobilization of the community, schools, and so on, or something that we call a desktop simulation, right? Which is basically just going through the motions, going through the procedures, ensuring that each agency, all stakeholders know what to do in the event of an emergency. So it is tested annually, and we have and documented, of course.
And what about when it comes to dealing with the community? We know when it comes to your household, it's dear to us. We don't want to leave the household. How are we engaging these people?
Our motto is preserving life and property. we teach them to be safe first. Your life is always first.
Yes.
You can always come back and buy your household items. It's not something that we'll say you can wait until you take out your TV or sofa and thing. What we identified in these areas are what we call safe zones. The highest point where it studied that the water wouldn't reach, and that's a safe zone. We pinpoint certain areas, like for example, Cristo Rey. We know that the basketball court is their safe zone, and we run more than one practices with the school and the community already. We test the time and everything and stuff like that. In San Ignacio, the safe zone would be Falcon Field. That's right where the new town council office is. In Bullet Tree, it would be up at the Adventist
Hill. Yeah.
Adventist School Hill, right? And Santa Familia, it's the same thing up where we call Neil's Building. And these are places that been identified with the community, working with us together with BECOL. So it's not like what Oscar said, it's a team. So we continue to focus on things like that, to keep them prepared.
There's a few things. One, that in 2017, I think it was late, we did the full simulation.
Yeah.
From there, we learned a little, to improve it. So over the past 2 years, we have been improving. There was recently a study that was commissioned, I think should be finishing anytime now, to see what were the challenges. Of course, sirens was one of those. The siren were not the same sound, the same level. There are some parts that were not heard,
Called dead
certain
spots.
dead zones, so that was being improved. So there was a full scale that then fed into the 2018 simulation in terms of desktop, and it is being improved. Secondly, we have this, in terms of community outreach, we have the PPC, right?
Public participation
Committee, which we chair as DOE, but it involves almost all these chairpersons from these villages that are vulnerable, that are priority, but also includes other key members, such as, apart from us three here, it involves also Ministry of Health. It involves the tour guide or the tour operators in the area. It involves even media personnel that to become more aware and so on. No? So it is an all-encompassing as possible, especially the community chair people from these villages.
Now, I'd imagine the biggest challenge in putting together your emergency plan is the idea of moving thousands of people. This isn't like a hurricane where you have maybe a day at minimum to get out of an area. This is immediately drop everything and get out of the zone as fast as you can. Some people move faster, some people move slower, some people take it more serious. What's been your experience in your drills and your simulations as to how quickly people are moving to safety?
All right. Well, with the full-scale simulation we conducted in 2017, I think it was, we got a fairly good response from the public. We actually, like I said, we engaged a few schools, a couple businesses downtown San Ignacio and so on to participate in the simulation. And at NEMO had evaluators out there, and we saw that the response time was adequate. They reached the safe zones in time. Especially with the schools, the teachers were able to organize the students properly so that they would reach the safe zones within the allotted time. All right, like Mr. Alegria mentioned a while ago, we're currently updating a flood study. Basically, a flood study was done when the Chaleo Dam was built to look at what would happen in the event of probable maximum flood, and as well if there was a potential dam failure at Chaleo, right? And then all that water came downstream. So we commissioned a study. That study was done in 2005, and from there we figured out which ones would be the safe zones in each of the vulnerable communities, right? And we clearly saw where that study showed us clearly where the areas that would be inundated. So that's what's being updated now to take into account changes in land use since 2005, to take into account the additional the Vaca Dam that was built after 2005, right? So like Mr. Alegria said, that new study should be out soon, and that should provide us more updated information, better information as to how to respond.
What's the allotted time for people to move to the safe zone?
Currently, we give people a maximum of an hour. The study actually, the time varies depending on the community. The water would obviously reach certain areas earlier than others, but we advise people to depend on no more than an hour to get to safety. Yeah. So like Mr. Westby was saying, it's not time to be looking at grabbing your TV, grabbing your pets and so on. Right? Yeah. The main objective is to get your family together and get them to the safe zone in time.
You know, from DOE and NEMO's standpoint, you're very well versed in public education and preparing people for different eventualities. And you know, especially when it's a voluntary situation, it can be challenging. How do you feel that people have responded to the information? Do you feel that they are fully aware of the potential threats if an emergency should arise?
I would put it.
Go ahead.
I would put it like this. Excuse me. If the siren goes off right now in San Ignacio, my phone won't be ringing. And if I answer, Mr. Westby, the siren, what's the problem? Is there a problem with the dam and things like that? And that's when I realized that these people are listening to us.
Yeah.
Because we used to test the siren every month, sung it naturally, and we found out that it's the same thing happening. People calling you because they are aware of the siren song and they want to know
what's going on.
What's going on? You have people at the market vendors packing up, trying to move out and things like that.
Yeah.
So and we know that the message is out there.
Yeah.
But we are not satisfied. We want to get it more in depth. That it will be very hard to get everybody involved. Yeah. We concentrate on the schools a lot because we don't know if we can't tell if there's going to be a failure or something with the dam, if it's going to be 9 o'clock in the night or 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
So we practice with the schools a lot. The schools identify there are people who will be taking care of children and think they have their plans, and it's very good.
Yeah.
But to tell you that yes, the public is quite aware. But I still think that more can be.
Yeah, we have as part of our annual activities doing presentations to all these villages that I mentioned. Yes. So we coordinate us through the village chairman or chairlady in order to have these presentations where all these issues are discussed and question and answer issues are addressed too. So we try to keep them, the entire community also involved in what the EWS is, flooding issues, sirens, what to look out for, and what to do. So we do involve them a lot.
What's the difference in planning for a daytime event versus a nighttime event?
Generally, and that's why BECOL went back and did that study concerning the song of the siren and the dead spot, as Mr. Alegria mentioned earlier, because it would be different in the night. Most people would be at sleep compared to the day when people would be out. So BECOL is not happy with what the result we were getting, so they went back, they hired some professionals, and hopefully that we could make that song more genuine and harder that people in the dead spots can hear and could wake them up. The idea is to wake them up out there deep asleep. We can't go and knock on everybody's door and tell them, you know what?
Time to move.
Time to move. And that's why the system is being implemented. So it would be, it's quite a difference between the day and the night.
Yes, and you know, and it's the same, because we're not the same as in the difference. But funny you mentioned nighttime at 9, people are still alert to a certain extent. Daytime at 9, we're all fully alert. But in terms of the questions family are asking about a family plan, because that's one of the things that we always make mention here. The hurricane season is here. Be prepared. But it takes the entire family to be a part of this, and everybody should be cognizant of it. So what are we saying to the families in the event, and in terms of what their plan should do, what their plan should be, so everybody can be evacuated? Because it has you can't go knock on this door, that door. Even if you do, then what about grandma over there? And how are we going to deal with this situation? So what are we saying to families in terms of their particular plan?
Keep informed. Inform your neighbors if you can. If you have to holler, if you have to shout, whatever you do, just try to wake them up and get out as quick as you can. When we look at night, it might be a Saturday night where there's big events, all these nightclubs, downtown San Ignacio is open, you know, and things like that. You have to consider DJ shouting, things on the mic. People won't pay that any mind, and these are things that we have to look at too.
Yeah.
Right? So we go into, as Oscar said and Martin, we go into these communities, and most of the time we do this session is to work with the people in the villages, and it's nighttime. So you have public officers and other agencies in night doing that extra work, and we hope for the community to participate with us. Sometimes it's not too good, sometimes it's okay, but we need that coordination from the villages in these who are sitting in these impacted zones. We need that cooperation. We need that. We can't do it by ourselves.
Yeah.
Has there been any coordination with the phone providers, perhaps to send text blasts and get everyone on board or aware of the situation in the event?
Not as yet. It's an idea that has been brought up in the Public Participation Committee discussions, and it's something that we're prepared to look at because like Mr. Alegria mentioned, we're currently, what we do in terms of informing people is we're mainly doing public meetings, presentation at schools and so on. We realize we have to move with the times and start to engage other media platforms, regular media, social media, phone media, and especially like you said, in an emergency, a text blast might help maybe during the day when people are alert. At night, I'm not sure how effective it would be when people are sleeping, right? But for that reason, we have, especially at night, we have the early warning system, like we keep mentioning. That would be the primary mode of alerting people, and we're currently looking at improving that system. Simulations have showed us gaps in that system, and so we're looking to improve that, because that would be basically the first alert that anybody would get.
Yeah.
We are updating the communications plan, right?
Right,
Yeah.
we're
Communication, which includes all these mass media.
Yeah.
And don't forget that NEMO has a hotline too,
Yes.
which is 936.
Yeah.
It's 24 hours operational.
936.
Yeah.
Now, Martin, clearly what this shows is looking at how contingency plans that are put in place need to be updated, because when you talk about updating a plan from 2005, the communities themselves have grown and perhaps expanded into different areas that weren't covered before. Is this a normal practice when someone embarks on a project like BECOL has and has an emergency plan in place, that there's a normal refresher on the plan itself?
It is a requirement. Now the periods depends on the type, size, and location of the project that these time frames are, but it is mentioned that on a regular basis these needs to be updated. It doesn't mean that between 2005 and 2018 we haven't on a regular basis looked at it and tried to improve it, tweak it a little from here and there. But there comes a time like now, like it was last year 2018, that we determined that it has to be now
a full overhaul.
Full overhaul after 10, 12 years. No? So that is an ongoing and a regular on our environmental compliance plans that we sign with private projects or public projects too.
You know, speaking of flooding, I think, well, for me, within my lifespan, I think that TD16 was the worst ever. Roads flooded, bridge flooded. In terms of that, have we seen any other or anything close to? Because that was one of them that actually panicked the entire nation. There were lives lost in that flooding. In terms of that, have we seen anything close to it? And are we prepared for such a thing? Because that was extreme.
Since 2008, we haven't seen flood of that magnitude. That would be what we call a 50-year, 100-year flood. Something like that. We learned a lot. The experience we had, especially in Cala Creek. We'll use Cala Creek as an example. Most of the houses were built on the ground. If you could remember, almost every house was covered to the roof.
Yeah.
We found out that one house survived that was in that area, which was on stilts, was about 8 to 9
feet high.
And we used that as a model when we started working in there, and we elevated the houses that we could have elevated, and we built new houses that we could afford, and those were on still. The thing is that going into those areas then, the elderly person in Cala Creek will tell you that water never come up to that height, so they won't come out. But now, if the water raised 2-3 feet, the chairperson will call you and say, Mr. Westby or Mr. Ramclam, who is the coordinator in Cayo, water is rising. So they conscious now
Of the possibility.
So they are prepared to come out. First, you have to go in there and tell them you got to come out.
You got to come out, yes.
But now they are prepared. As soon as that water is what they say, once bitten, twice shy.
Yes.
We had the same issue in Bullet Tree with one family. And this elderly person and his wife, they have a big family, big old sons and things like that. And he will tell you that he was born and grew up here, and the water never passed that window where he lives close to the riverbank. And low up on his roof because of refusing to leave that night. So these are the things we learn from the flood. But we keep the sensitization going on because you have different floods like what you say. You have flash floods, which we find out occur a lot after 2008. We have areas where they even have flash flood that have like 7 miles, you know, and Oscar mentioned something about deforestation and things like that, and these are the contributions to such thing, and Mr. Alegria could attest to things like those. So there's a lot of different floods. You have torrential flood. A village like Billy White suffers from torrential floods.
Wow.
Torrential rain. But our coordinators are trained to identify these things, and within their plans they could address it. We mitigate some by drainage and things like that, but we can't do all.
You mentioned quite a few points that I want to follow up on, but before I get there, I want to get Oscar in here, because clearly what we're talking about is preparing for a potential threat that can start at one of the dams. And I want to be very clear about what the potentials are. You mentioned complete dam failure, floods, as we're heading into the rainy season. And we know that a lot of the work is going to be, things are going to be kick-starting in that area. Talk to us about what the actual threats are of any one of these eventualities happening.
All right. First of all, the possibility of any of the dams failing is extremely remote. It's very, very low chance.
You do studies on this,
of course.
I would hope,
yes, we do. And of course, the proper engineering went into building these dams, taking into account things like earthquakes, probable maximum floods that would likely impact the dams over the course of their lifetime, right? So the studies take all of this into account. Like I said, the possibility is extremely remote. However, we still have to prepare for them. Right? We still have to prepare that it could happen, especially the rainy season coming on. You could get a catastrophic hurricane that would trigger a probable, what we call in our field, a probable maximum flood, which would be like a 500-year, 1,000-year flood, something the likes of which we've never seen, which would maybe or could possibly cause one or all three of the dams to fail. Right? So yes, we take all of these things into account in the studies. We have our own internal emergency preparedness plan that we review every year just prior to the hurricane season. We coordinate with NEMO to ensure that our plan is merging with their plan. We review our EWS procedures and so on, ensure that the hardware is properly working. Of course, we do monthly maintenance on these things, ensure that they're always ready to be deployed when needed.
When we talk about buildings, when we talk about hurricanes, we talk about what they can withstand. What is the capacity of the dams in withstanding different hurricanes and the level of inundation that would come with it?
Like I said, the dams are built to withstand probable maximum flood, which would be, in this case, a worst case Cat 5 hurricane that would bring torrential volumes of rain, right? Yes, they are designed for basically the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Right?
Were they designed for earthquakes? Because you mentioned that, and earthquakes
Yes.
are more of a more recent threat for us in this country.
Yeah.
Yes, they do. The engineering did take into account earthquakes or tremors, because we really don't experience earthquakes as such.
True.
It would be more tremors from earthquakes occurring in our neighboring
Regions,
countries.
yes.
Yeah.
Right. So yes, they do take into account.
Wow.
And then, Martin, I think when you talk about what happens along the riverways, we can't neglect to mention, and I know because we've had the DUB environmental group quite a few times talking about the riparian forest and how land use doesn't really take into account the necessity of having what are the trees along the riverbanks to help with erosion, but also with flooding. What has there been any study to look at what the landscape now looks like along the riverways, especially since you've updated this plan?
Sure. I know UB, with the assistance of WWF, I think recently did such an assessment of the Belize River watershed, which we work very closely with. We were part of the initiative when we launched too. So we learned from those data collection and tried to improve the policies, including the plans that go along with these policies in terms of land use.
Now, if I were to use an example so people can clearly understand what we're talking about, it's like mangroves along a seaside, and we have policies for what you can do with mangroves. Do we have those same policies along the rivers?
Yeah, the 66 feet reserve is famously known as for all waterways.
Okay.
So it includes rivers, major streams, and the coastline.
Yeah.
So we do insist in, for example, we're talking about the Kaya district,
Yes.
Belize district to a certain degree. When we review, let's say, agricultural projects, one of our requirements is to leave, we go sometime even beyond the 66 feet that is required by the National Lands Act.
Yeah.
We go to perhaps 200 feet, 100 feet, depending on the peculiarity or the sensitivity of that specific area. We go beyond that on both sides of the rivers or major streams.
Which of course would make those areas much more safer.
Yeah, because that buffer, that 200 or 100-foot buffer, let's say, those are not only for the flooding aspects, it also assists in agrochemical runoffs in terms of capturing those before it reaches the river.
Excellent.
So it has more than one benefits, similar to the mangroves on the coastline. It has more than one benefits of leaving such as buffers around those islands, or in this case, along the river banks. No?
Are we able to keep up with the enforcement?
Yeah, we do a lot of enforcement, notwithstanding people are people, human beings, and unless they feel it in their pocket, as we say, they will not listen. And so we try to enforce where we have to. Litigation or penalization is the last resort, but when you hear us in the court, it's because we have had 1 or 2 years of trying to work with these particular individuals or companies, and we haven't gotten through. So a lot is resolved long before we reach that legal action issue. So we work with agricultural, residential, tourism, all these types of projects that are located in these sensitive areas. We're talking about the Belize River right now, but we also have some lagoons, some coastal areas which it's still applicable at buffer zone.
Yeah.
But in terms of the preparedness plan, we know that one of the biggest causes of flooding in particular areas would be the fact that there's debris in the river. What about that plan? Is that a part of the plan, and who's responsible for it? Anybody?
You mean like garbage?
Yes, garbage.
Littering.
You must have clearance, because in order for waterways to flow properly, then it must be cleared.
Yeah.
And that's a very good point. Not only in the rivers, but in these villages, you have simple things like culverts that is
They're clogged.
Plug up. The village council, some village council just believe in, okay, water start raising, call NEMO. We go there with Ministry of Works, do the assessment. It's a simple culvert that is clogged up, that's stopping all the water and backing up to all the houses, and that's part of the problem in Billy White. Right? So we ask that the community help themselves too.
Yeah.
NEMO has one backhoe, and we do major work in this country, mitigation work. Right now it's in Belize Rural. We should move it sometime probably this week or next week in, I think it's in Machos, then Roaring Creek to Kai, or then go down south and things like that. And that one backhoe does magic for us. We do a lot of mitigation work, honestly.
Yeah.
Okay.
So looking at the last simulation exercise that you did in 2017 and your now updated plan, which will be completed soon, what are the major changes that you will need to communicate to the communities about the early warning system?
All right. First of all, it's two things we're doing this year, or starting this year. The flood study that was done in 2005 is being updated to, and this time around we're using more advanced technology. We're looking at better topographical data, meteorological data. This last study is now also incorporating LiDAR data to better map the topography, the terrain, whatever obstacles might be in the way downstream. So we're getting a much better picture of what would happen to the flood waters coming downstream. Right? The preliminary report is showing that the actual response time will even be increased. In terms of, right now we're telling people 1 hour. The study is now showing that, since it's a much more accurate study, is now showing that the flood waters would take a little more time than that to reach downstream areas. So people have a little more time to respond, to get to safe areas. Right. We're also looking to upgrade the early warning system hardware, and we have to realize when we say early warning system, it's not only the sirens. The sirens are only one component of the response mechanism. Right. Sirens, like I said, are the first alert to people living in these vulnerable areas to that some sort of emergency is happening. Right. So we're looking to increase coverage of in terms of where people can hear the sirens. So looking at San Ignacio, we'll be adding additional sirens, more powerful sirens in San Ignacio and the villages, incorporating, like I said, better technology now. Not only in terms of the power of the sirens themselves, but also better command and control technology that would enable the system to operate more efficiently and smoothly. Right?
Again, these are two of the improvements that came up.
Yeah.
However, we are developing a 4-year plan to see what is needed between now and 4 years to do it, because we can't do everything in 1 year. You need to improve first year, second year. So we are about to complete a 4-year plan to see what is required to improve not only the early warning but the response there too.
You know, I wanted
definitely something to look at is the phone reach out,
the
because I think
that's
where we are in technology.
I think like what Oscar said, that came up in a meeting.
It's been discussed before.
Well, gentlemen, I want to say this much. You know, I think what we have spoken about, definitely, it's a very serious issue, and one that we hope that as best as your plans are, or as good as your plans are, that we never have to put in the effect. And we count on BECOL to be able to do their part there as well. But we do wish you the best of luck with finalizing the updates on the plan and your community outreach as well. Thank you for coming in and keeping us updated.
Thanks for
Thank you.
All right. We're going to go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we'll be finding out about a brand new mobile app. It's called Vistro Mobile. So stay tuned.